Okay, welcome back. In today's episode, I got two more N64 cartridges, and the first one up here is Super Smash Bros. For the N64, and I can't get anything out of it. Not a black screen, just no signal. So let's take this apart and see what's going on. Okay, with the board out, I don't see any rust, I don't see any corrosion. The battery seems to not have leaked. It seems this cartridge is fine. A little dirty, but fine overall. So upon closer inspection of this board, these joints don't seem to be factory. These pins seem to be reflowed by somebody in the past. So they did a good job. Nothing that stands out. So I guess they reflowed everything and they still couldn't get it to work. So I'll be taking a look at that with that into consideration. So I've been going across these pins and trying to find if there's any breaks in continuity, and I seem to have found one here. Now, from the naked eye, you don't notice anything, but it seems as though if you touch one probe to the pin and the other probe to the chip leg, it doesn't have any continuity upon first touch. But if you press a little bit harder, it seems to get continuity. So there's a break here, and it's it's an unconventional break. It's either a cold joint or an actual break. So I'm gonna try to reflow it and see if that solves the problem. So it didn't solve the problem. So I'm gonna try to remove all the solder just to get a closer look at what's going on here and see if I can get the pad off. See, as you can see, there is a break there and the pad is already shriveled up, so the through hole is gone. So I gotta figure out something more unconventional, see if I can fix this a different way. So I'm going to take my new favorite tool here, the fiberglass pen, and I'm going to scratch up some of the solder mask, see if I can pre-tin the trace, and then create a bridge from the trace to the pin. So in the past, I've shown different way to repair a patch, and just to not be repetitive, I'm just doing it this way, just to showcase a different way to solve a problem. In the future, I might actually try to use silver paint to repair a broken trace, so stay tuned for that. So I'm my own biggest critic, and sometimes looking back at the footage, I always just I question my methods, and it's almost hard to watch myself fix a trace knowing that I could have did a better job. So just keep in mind that I'm not a professional repairman. I don't do this for a living. This is just a hobby for me. So if I can do it, you can do it, and just you could probably do a better job than I can looking back at this job here. For here, an example here, I've already got the pin in place and it seems okay. All I'd have to do was take flush cuts and cut the end off, the excess end that's touching the other pin, and it would have been a done deal. But instead I tried to readjust the wire or the component leg, and I do the job twice. So now I'm adding more solder instead of using flux, so just keep that in mind. Once again, I'm not a professional. So finally I do add some flux, and look how easy this is. So I advocate using flux almost exclusively for these patch wire trace repairs. So right here I'm just taking a pair of tweezers and try to readjust that pin that's hanging off. That's not actually soldered to the board, it's just a little tip that's hanging off, and I don't need to cut it. I don't want to risk snipping or clipping the trace on the bottom of it, so I'm just going to adjust it so it doesn't, so the solder mask doesn't eat away and then short against the other pin up below it. So right there is a simple solution. So I got a little piece hanging off, a little bit of solder hanging off this pin, so I'll just clip it just so it won't short against the other pin. It wasn't going to short anyway, but just to make the job a little bit more presentable, I'll clip that little excess off, and we're done here. So it seems like we're getting continuity, so far so good. So I overlooked one more thing. It's not just making continuity or creating a patch between the chip leg and the pin, because this pin continues up into the via, and since the whole pad is gone, the pin isn't actually touching the via, or the trace isn't continued on into the via. So I have to create another patch. So if I would have known at the time, I would have taken a larger component leg and just soldered it in 3 different points. But I didn't. I overlooked it. So what I'm gonna do is just take a smaller component leg and create a second patch here. So here I go again, overcomplicating things. Instead of using flux and then dripping a little bit of solder and doing it right, I keep touching it 1,000 times, and eventually it costs me. It creates a bigger problem. Since I can't leave well enough alone, now the via's gone. So now I'm actually going to have to use a patch wire from the bottom left pin on the bottom chip to the bottom left pin on the top chip, and that should create the trace that I need. So what I'm going to do now is just pre-tin both chip legs just to give me something to solder to. So of course I'll just clean the board up, just that little bit of flux that's left, and since the toothbrush didn't knock off my patch wire here, so I know that it's in there good. So here's the board complete with one trace patched up with a component leg on one side and then the patch wire on the other side. It's not the most beautiful cart, but if it works, it's better off than how it started. So it seems to fire up, and it's working perfectly. So let me close this up, and on to the second game. So up next we got a Mario Kart 64, and it's showing the same symptoms as the Smash Brothers. No black screen, just no image at all. So I'm not getting any image. So let's take this apart, see what's going on. So by the look of the outside of this cartridge, it looks pretty worn out, pretty beat up. And upon first glance of the inside, it doesn't look any better. So there's a lot of rust in this corner, on both corners rather. And I don't even know if I can get this screw out. So the screw on the right I got out fairly easy. The one on the left is giving me trouble. So since there's so much rust on the head of this screw, my screwdriver just keeps slipping. There's nothing to grip. So I'm going to take a Dremel tool here and just file down a divot in the head of this screw just so I can unscrew it with a standard screwdriver. So it seems to be working. So the screw seems to be coming out slowly. So of course with my luck it's split in half. There was so much rust on the head of this screw that it just cracked in half. So I don't know what I'm gonna do about that. Okay, before I start testing for continuity or doing anything else, I have to clean up this board. So I've already started left to right testing for continuity between the pin and the chip legs, just like this until you hear a beep, and then if I hear a beep I go to the next pin. So it seems I found one that visually looks okay, but doesn't actually have continuity all the way up to the chip. So I'm gonna do what I usually do, just file it down with a fiberglass pen. I know I didn't get much of it on video, but yeah, you've already seen this in the past. File down some of the solder mask, and then just pre-solder it, pre-tin the head, and just I'll use a patch wire to run it to the chip. So I know that from another game that uses the same board, I know that that pin that I scratched up goes to this chip leg here. So I can add this patch wire and that should do it. So here's the game. Before I close it up, let me test it out. And just like that, it's working. So one simple patch that you couldn't really even see is all it took to get this game to work. So here's another important thing. Whenever you add a jumper wire like this, it always obstructs these shrouds here. So what I usually do is I take a hot iron and I make sure that right where the patch wire is, just burn a little indent. This way the joint won't obstruct this little shroud here, and the shroud could actually sit over the joint or on top of it. I could have probably taken off a little bit more, but it's still closed up and this game is still working to me. So as far as that rust on the board, I really couldn't do much about it. I did close it up using the same shielding, and I forgot to record. But yeah, I didn't do anything special. I just closed the cartridge back up like I did the first one, and I reused all the old parts. So this video is about to close out. I know it's a bit abrupt, but I do appreciate everybody for liking, commenting, subscribing, and once again, stay tuned for more projects.